How's it going, y'all? This is Nate Drolet, and welcome back for part 2 of this advanced series. I hope you had some good takeaways from the first episode. I've got a lot to cover today, so without delaying any further, I'll go ahead and get started. Number 11 is how to dead point. Now, there are a couple of phrases in rock climbing that I think are just perpetually misused, and dead pointing is kind of one. What people say isn't technically wrong, but it's not a full encompassing definition of the phrase. So a lot of people think of dead pointing as it's just a big move, right? Like maybe big move to a crimp. What a dead point really is anytime something travels up in the air, right before it falls back to the ground, it pauses. So it goes up, pauses, falls back down. This moment where the pause is, that's the dead point. So the idea isn't we're doing a really big move. It is we're trying to time our movement so that when we hit this pause, we grab a hold in that brief moment of weightlessness. And we do that before we fall away. This is incredibly hard to do. Obviously, it's the slightest little moment. But the more we can practice this timing of going up, hitting that float moment, and grabbing things softly, the better off we're going to be. So often, what really makes hard climbing on bad holds so challenging is not the size of the holds. I mean, if you can dead hang the holds on your project, and I've seen this plenty of times, people will hop on, let's say, the moonboard, and they're like, I really struggle on this move. These holds are really bad. Maybe it's connecting 2 yellow holds. And I'll say, okay, well, can you just grab both holds and pick your feet off the ground? They're like, well, yeah. Okay, well, then you're really strong on those holds. You're very capable. The only thing that makes it hard then is speed. We're hitting holds too quickly. What we have to do is try and eliminate as much of this speed component as we can. And you can already guess where this is going, but we do this with dead pointing. This practice of finding that pause. I'm a big fan of practicing this on a campus board with your feet on the kicker. If there's no kicker, feet on the ground, that works great. Practicing going up and trying to land just as softly as you absolutely can. Can you hit holds making 0 noise? Start with one hand and then practice doing doubles. Can you do doubles, feet on the kickboard once again? And can you land softly, as if you're trying to land on Christmas ornaments without breaking them? How softly can you grab these holds? Because once again, the difference between being able to just hang holds and being able to do big moves to them is speed and our ability to control it. And if you're finding this information helpful and you want to show some support to the channel, I'd appreciate if you hit that subscribe button below. Number 12, can you flip the switch? So this isn't just about trying hard on a climb. This is about getting yourself into this ideal state to be able to perform well. What this basically means is, can we ensure high quality goes time after time? One way I like to think about this is almost like a pre-flight checklist. Can we go down and check these boxes and make sure that we're doing the most that we can in order to ensure a great effort? Some of the things I like to use are run the beta through your head twice so that you know exactly what you're doing. Check the landing or the fall. So if it's a boulder, I make sure the pads are good. If it's inside, just make sure no one's walking under me. If it's a route, I'm going to talk with my belayer about whatever fall zone might be a thing. Number 3, take some breaths. Take a few deep, calming breaths to help settle yourself. Number 4, zero in, really focus. So if there's anything else that's been distracting you, can you tune that out for this moment? This pairs well with the breathing. So just big inhale, big exhale, try and clear everything out. And lastly, right before you pull on, remind yourself to try hard. Realistically, we don't get that many great efforts in a day. These efforts where you are warmed up, you're recruited, you are ready to go, and the conditions are good, everything's right, you're at your project. The amount of at-bats that we get, to where we get to step up at the plate and swing, is not that many. God forbid you sport climb, you get 2 to 3. We need to be able to lock it in. If you're bouldering and you have 6 good red point goes on your project before you have to go try something else or just work the moves individually, you need to make those 6 goes count. And I think creating a little checklist like this is a fantastic way to make steps towards that direction. Number 13 is holding your breath to be able to create more tension. So this is a tactic that's used by lifters all the time. It's called the Valsalva maneuver. I won't go through the full details of how to do it right now, but essentially you're holding your breath and creating this internal pressure, and that allows you to have more body tension. In climbing, we're often told, breathe, keep breathing, breathe more, relax and breathe. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work. If you need to create a ton of pressure to lift the car off the baby to do this undercling crux move, we don't need this nice slow yoga inhale. No, we need to lock things down, create a lot of tension. Here's the problem. You got to remember how to relax after that though, because otherwise you are going to fall apart. So understanding not only how do we hold our breath to create more tension and to be able to produce more force, but also how do we bring it back down? So if we're cranking it up to a 10, how do we bring it back down like a 2? Just so that we don't explode and fall off the wall. Number 14, how to modulate your speed of climbing in order to change the amount of tension and precision that you have. Several decades ago, famous track coach Bud Winters wrote this book called Relax and Win. Having worked with sprinters, he realized that a lot of them stayed so tense and tight that they couldn't actually express their athletic abilities. And so in order to sprint faster, they actually had to learn how to relax. So what we can take from that is that relaxation and speed pair well. So if I'm trying to be explosive and dyno and jump as far as I can, it actually pays off to be a little more loose in the arms, a little more relaxed, and that helps me to be more fluid when I jump. However, if I'm doing a big jump move that I need to be tense for when I latch at the finish, I might actually need to slow down a little bit. And slowing down will create more tension. It's at this point for advanced climbers, you're actually strong enough to overpower moves now, which is a very funny thing. And a lot of times, a lot of sport climbers will become guilty of this. They will, every time they get to a power move, just try and explode as hard as they can to be able to do the move, where in reality, they're going too fast. And by going too fast, there's too much relaxation and they can't stick the move. So instead, what you can actually have them do is slow down a little bit, and that creates a little more tension. Ironically, by them going less powerfully, they end up being able to do these powerful moves much better. Number 15, there's nothing special about the grade that you climb. A lot of us will try and convince ourselves that it's the grade that we're climbing at that in our region just isn't that good, or there's not a lot of them around. I hear this everywhere and for every grade. You'll hear people say something like, oh, well, the climbs are really good up to about V7 here, but then there's not much that's really good in V8 or V9, and then it gets good again at V10, which is really just a roundabout way of saying you don't like the climbs that make you feel uncomfortable. Something else you might hear, maybe even coming from your own mouth, is people will describe their gyms in the same way, revolving around grades. So they might say something like, oh, well, the grades are really consistent up to about V7, and then they get just like super hard after that. And so, either I can do climbs quickly or not at all. Now, that last sentence I said might be the biggest red flag of all of advanced rock climbing. If you feel that you can either only do things fast or not at all, something's wrong. There's nothing special about your grade or your region or your gym. What's most likely happening is you're an advanced climber. It took you a while to get to where you are now, and it is very likely you just forgot what it feels like to truly struggle. If you climb V7 now, what did it feel like 2 years ago when you broke into that grade? You were probably fighting for your life to send the softest V7 you could find. And that's okay. That's how we all do it. But now, when you want to climb V8, you've spent 2 years getting very well established at this grade. And so, you can do V7 pretty quickly now. And even in a lot of styles, maybe some take you 2-3 sessions, but you're pretty solid. But V8 feels so impossibly hard. And it's because we have to go back to struggling. We have to go hunt down the softest one we can find, lowest climb with the highest number you can get your hands on. And we have to then work for it. And that's hard to do. It's hard to go from feeling very competent to being like, oh, you know what? I'm back to not being good at this, and this feels really challenging. So most likely that's what's actually happening here. And it's not the grade. It's just us. Number 16, can you pull on with belief? The idea of developing confidence is so important in climbing, and there's a lot that goes into it. But just having it on your radar, are you pulling onto this climb with the attempt of trying to send it, or are you just trying not to fall? I really like this idea of climbing offensively versus defensively, and sometimes it even changes on a climb. There are plenty of times where people will be climbing very offensively. They're here to send until they stick the crux move, and then suddenly they're defensive. They're now trying to climb just not to fall. Like, how do I just not blow it? And that is the fastest way to ruin a red point attempt, is to go from I'm here to send this to I'm here to not fall, because suddenly we become defensive. We play it safe. And that's not a way to be able to send hard rock climbs. Putting this time into developing not just that trigger that we talked about a few points ago of, can I ensure good goes? Can we now add that layer of, can I ensure good goes and have confidence that I am here to do this rock climb? Number 17 is using your Fallaway Direction to try and diagnose why things are going wrong. So Fallaway Direction, what I mean by that is you hit a hold and you fall. Well, which way did you go? Did you fall straight back? That's interesting. Did you go fall right? Did you fall left? Did you spin as you fell? These things are all very important information that we need to collect. Because if I am falling to the right, what that means is that's where my body wants to go. That's trying to find balance by going over there. And we need to figure out why that is. For simplicity's sake, we should look at end position, start position, and speed. End position is where you should really start. So if you hit a hold and you swing off in a wild direction, check to make sure if you're in the right end position. Generally speaking, if you swing off to the right, your body wanted to be further right. So can you just end up a little further right when you latch that hold? Does that fix the problem? Cool. That's great. Next, I would say test speed. Like, if it doesn't matter if you're going to the correct end position, if you're going way too fast, you're just going to blast right through it. So you can worry about position and balance all day long, but you can go too fast and have a problem. And you can also go too slow to where you don't quite get there. And then you might just end up barn dooring off because you didn't get to the end position. Lastly, we'll look at start position. And essentially from there, if the last two are good, then make corrections accordingly with the start position. So once again, if I'm going too far to the right, when I land, my body wants to be further right. Maybe I start a little further to the right. Give that a try. Number 18 is fluttering your hand to find balance. Now, earlier I talked about how the less points on the wall you have, the easier it is to find balance. And this kind of plays off of that, but at a slightly higher level. So if I'm stuck between these two crimps, I've got my feet on, and I need to find a good balance to match this. Sometimes it's hard. I was talking about it. It's really hard if you got a lot of points on. Well, what is balance? Now, you could use the swing away method we just talked about. But another thing you can do is if I'm trying to balance to be able to match this hold, I can kind of come over. I know I need to be over here, and I can start fluttering this hand. And by taking this hand off, what it does is it's going to find that natural balance point to where, if I fully took it off, I would just swing over here. But maybe it's a little too hard to do that. Like, if this is actually a hard rock climb and you can't just one arm hang this hold, we need to be able to just lightly take a little bit of weight off and then pay attention to where our body is trying to settle as we flutter that hand. That's going to give us a little bit of a clue as to where we need to be. Now, whenever you go back to do the move, like this is a good diagnostic tool, But when you go to do the move, fluttering isn't always the best because every time you flutter a low hand, the high hand is just doing more and more work. And this is actually a really common problem that people have. Anytime people are like, oh, it just feels like I'm one arm dead hanging this hold. It's like, well, brother, you got another hand on and you got 2 feet on. You should not feel like you're one arm dead hanging this. Oftentimes it's because people will naturally flutter a low hand to find balance and they just take it entirely off for all intents and purposes. Like it's sitting there, but it's not doing anything. So use the flutter as a method to find balance. But when you're actually trying to send, memorize where that balance is and still keep a lot of weight on that low hand because we want to use both hands. Number 19 is team hands, aka use both hands. Look, if you got both hands, use them. If you only have one hand, you're probably honestly already operating at 100% capacity. Good work. Whenever we're climbing, we have a few bad habits that we kind of pick up. For sport climbers, what they end up doing is they will grab a hold, and as they're going to move, they'll like kind of relax this low hand, maybe even shake it out a little bit, because that's efficient. In easy climbing, that's actually a great way to go. If you're just on sinker jugs, like you don't need to be just crushing both of these holds the whole time. You'll fall off. It's going to go terribly. So you kind of learn how to relax the low hand, maybe even drop it, shake it as you go. And so you turn into almost this one-armed climber to where you're kind of relaxing and doing these one-arm pulls at a time. But the issue is if you don't learn how to switch that off and on, then you get to hard climbing sequences and suddenly you're still trying to do this one-arm climber thing and it is not going to work out for you. Now, for all you boulderers, thank you for listening along on that little part. This comes up for y'all because we get so hyper obsessed on really bad holds that we forget everything else exists. And this is hilarious to watch. And ask yourself a question the next time you go bouldering. You're trying a really hard move. Let's say there's a really bad crimp. When you fall, ask yourself, you've got 4 limbs. What percentage of weight was each of those limbs taking? I can tell you right now, or even you can say, what percentage of effort were you giving in each of those limbs? More often than not, what we do is we say, this is a really bad hold. I'm going to devote all of my entire being into holding this. Your left hand could be on a jug. Why are you just death gripping this little crimp? Use both hands. Eventually, it is good to use all 4 points of contact. We'll get there eventually, but to start, use both hands. I like to think of it as team hands because, that's what you're doing. You're using them as a team. Start there. Don't jump ahead to all 4 points because it'll honestly probably end up with worse results than if you just start with 2 limbs at a time. Number 20 and last one for today. Knowing when it's better to make more foot moves rather than less. If you climb in the gym a lot, and especially on boards, which no hate, I love a board, you get really used to moving your hands and feet almost in a 1-to-1 ratio of hand move, foot move, hand move, foot move. The thing is, that is very fast, but it can really backfire in that it limits us on how much we can actually move our body around. And when we climb outside, it's much more common you're going to see something closer to a 1-to-3 hand to foot ratio. And I mean, you go to really technical sport climbing areas, it might get even higher than that. Typically, the more technical a place is, like you're just going to keep seeing more and more foot moves for every hand move. And there's a reason for that. More foot moves allows you so many different things. It can let you change the position of your body without having to just do a full pull-up. It can change which hand that you're distributing weight on more. If you do enough foot moves, I've got more weight on this and off of this, where if I just do one foot move, I might have to force myself to typewriter over. Comically, the people who get themselves stuck the most with this are climbers with really good hip mobility. Because what they can do is they can leave one foot way out there and they can place another one really high over here. Yes, you can physically do that, but it might be terrible for the actual efficiency of the climb. So just because you can get a very high step in one single movement doesn't mean that you should. And that concludes episode 2 of this advanced climbing series. Thanks for staying along. Let me know in the comments below, what were some things that you learned? Or were there any things that to you, you had maybe heard before, but this had connected in a different way, or maybe this was a slight iteration on something else. Once again, if you've got anything that you've heard and you're like, ooh, I'm not sure about that, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.